Welcome to the Resolute Warrior Podcast by Resolute Men Ministries, where we equip men to activate a life of authentic character. A resolute warrior is purposefully minded, steadfast in character, a man who walks in humility with an unshakable faith. We interview men who are having an impact in the Christian arena, as well as discussing topics related to men from a biblical perspective. It's about real life with real challenges with real men. And now to today's podcast.
I'm Rob Billingham, the host of the Resolute Warrior Podcast. It's my privilege to have on today's episode, Rob Maaddi. Rob is a multimedia personality, best-selling author, and dynamic speaker. He has covered the NFL and Philadelphia sports full-time for the Associated Press since 2000. He is a sports talk host at the 97.5 The Fanatic and the host and founder of the syndicated radio show Faith on the Field that originated on 610 ESPN Philly in April of 2017. Rob has written and co-written 8 books, including Football, Faith, and Baseball Faith. His most recent book is Birds of Prey, the story of the Philadelphia Eagles, faith, brotherhood, and the Super Bowl victory. Rob is a Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voter and past president of the Philadelphia chapter of Baseball Writers Association of America. Rob has also appeared locally on NBC Sports Philadelphia and Fox 29 Good Day Philadelphia, and nationally on CNN, ESPN, MSNBC, Sirius XM, Fox News, and numerous other radio and television stations across the United States and Canada. His byline has appeared worldwide. Rob and his wife, Remy, were breakout stars on Weez TV's first season of Marriage Boot Camp in 2013. They starred in the Remy and Rob spinoff before putting their television careers on hold following the birth of their twin girls, Alexia and Melania, in 2013. He's a Philadelphia native and has a Bachelor's of Arts in English from Rutgers Camden University and a Master of Journalism from Temple University. Rob is also a member of the Deacons Prison Ministry softball team, and his motto and sign-off is "Make a Difference, Be a Blessing." Rob, welcome to the Resolute Warrior Podcast, man.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate spending some time with you.
Hey, man, well, we really appreciate you taking time as well, and that's quite the bio, man. You really covered some ground over these years.
It's pretty long. I don't know when we put that together, but it might be on my website or something like that. But yeah, it's been a long career. It's been an awesome career, and I've been blessed to be able to do what I love for so long, for decades now. Which all that means, though, is that I'm getting old, man.
I feel the pain, my man. I feel the pain. So, hey, we like to have a little fun in the beginning before we dive into questions and get to know you a little bit. Right. So we call this our triple play round. You want to have some fun with this? You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, man.
I don't know that I ever turned a triple play playing baseball or softball, but
hey, well, this would be your first.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So, hey, if you could choose any 2 famous people to have dinner with, who would they be?
Number one's easy, Jesus. I've been asked this question before, and it's always been the same too. Jesus, to be able to just sit in his presence, to listen to his voice, to physically just see him, man, I think that would be the greatest thing ever. And the other one is Martin Luther King Jr. I've had a poster of MLK giving his "I Have a Dream" speech with the entirety of the speech, and I've had that hanging in my office for over 20 years. I just love what he stood for. I love how he fought for equality and how he emphasized his Christian faith throughout his fight, throughout his journey, the peaceful protests and everything that he hoped to accomplish. And man, in the times that we're living in right now, I wish that there was someone like MLK to really be at the forefront of equality and the fight for social justice.
Hey, amen to that. We need it more than ever. And what 2 better people could you have dinner with and just really just kind of share that heart and say, hey, where can we go from here, right? You have Jesus, share his love. You have MLK, who knew the love of Christ. So, yeah, we need that more than ever, brother. We need that more than ever. So who is your favorite band and or musician of all time?
Man, this has evolved over time, right? So you go through different seasons of your life. You go through different chapters of your life. I'll tell you right now, the band that I probably listened to the most the last 3 or 4 years is Elevation Worship from Elevation Church. I love their music. My wife got me into listening to Pastor Stephen Furtick, and we listen to him. We listen to their music. My daughters walk around the house singing their songs, and it's awesome. They have a song, Rattle, that's a recent release that's amazing. Unstoppable God has been the opening, the intro to my Faith on the Field show. Sea of Victory is a song that I've been listening a lot to since COVID-19 because I feel like there's meaning behind. We're going to see a victory at some point. We're going to see it. So I would say Elevation Worship right now is the band that is absolutely my favorite.
Yeah, their music is outstanding, man. The worship really moves you. That's my son's favorite as well. He really loves it. So we play it quite a bit around the house. So what is your favorite TV show?
Oh, man, this is tough because I feel like there's a lot of garbage on television. I'm not a big watcher at all. And I'll be honest, once we were in Florida when COVID hit, so we canceled our cable because we weren't home for 3.5 months. And then we came home and we were like, all we need right now is internet and Netflix, which we have for the kids in case they want to watch something. So there's a shortage of good television programming that you can watch with your children. Like the other day, we're trying to scan through things and like, what could we watch with them? I will tell you though, I do appreciate Hallmark Christmas movies. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. You know,
I'm with you.
I don't care. As a man, I will tell you, I will sit there Christmas season and watch some Hallmark Christmas movies with my wife. And you can watch those for the most part with your kids. There's always going to be like one kiss at the end of the movie. So you know when that's coming and you tell them to close their eyes. Other than that, it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I can expand on that a little bit. Yeah, you kind of know, the storyline before it happens, right? And that kind of drives my wife crazy because I'll watch it with her. But, some guys will say, hey, you surrender your man card if you watch that. I disagree. I think you show your man card if you do that. If you can sit there with your wife and just be a man and just go ahead and just let her enjoy it. And, yeah, even though it's quirky, man, it does have your attention, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, the term man up and man card and be a real man, that's all going to be featured in my next book. It's all about that. So
cool. Well, real quick, you got a title for it yet?
Huh?
You got a title for that book?
Well, it's called The Real Man Playbook, but that's not set in stone.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to try and break those stereotypes.
All right. When do you look to release that while we got you here?
Hopefully within the next 3 months.
Awesome, man. Good. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it.
Yes, sir.
So, hey, let's dive on in, man. Let's keep it real today as we're talking. You sound like a guy who wants to keep it real, so I appreciate that. So can you share a little bit about yourself, your family, and also how you came to your such a strong faith in the Lord? How did that all come about?
Wow. Well, I will say I grew up in Philadelphia, in South Philly, which is in a neighborhood that was predominantly Italian, Irish. My parents came to the U.S. from Palestine a little bit over 50 years ago. So my name isn't Rob, it's R-A-B-E, which is an Arabic word, Rabia, for spring, the season, not spring to jump. I speak fluent Arabic. We are in the minority. 10% of Palestinians are Christian. The other 90 are mostly Muslim. So I grew up as an outsider with a funny name and a background that was different. And it kind of like really, growing up, it could be, I went to Catholic schools for 12 years, and being in an environment where you don't fit in, it can have an impact a little bit on you. And I heard things, I was teased about stupid stuff, like kids would call me a sand, Nigger. They'd ask about my camel. So I never rode one, by the way, but it was difficult a little bit. Eventually, as I moved into high school, I just went by, instead of my actual first name, I just went by Rob. And that kind of like sat with me throughout my life and really kind of shaped how I grew up, because I always knew that I was different. And I decided that, like, if I'm going to be different, how can I stand out? And it pushed me. It pushed me to do better in school. It pushed me to do better in sports. I loved sports. I went into a career in sports, thought I could be a Major League Baseball player. Obviously, that stopped in college. But I did the next best thing for me, which was become a journalist, a broadcaster, and an author in sports. But for a long period of time, until I came to the Lord, growing up in the Catholic Church, I knew all about Jesus. I knew who he was. I was a big fan, I tell people, of Christ. I would go to church and I would leave Jesus there at church, at the altar, and I would go about my business, and I would do my thing 6 days a week. And then on the seventh day, I'd go back to church and I'd worship. And I was a very religious person, but I didn't know anything about having a relationship with Christ. So I thought to really fit in, to be cool. One of the things that at the time I was very misguided, and I thought, well, you got to hang out with beautiful women and be that kind of, like, to me at that time, I thought that was being a real man, which isn't being a real man, as I came to learn. So I got married at a younger age, not really all that young. I was in my 20s. And that didn't last long because I was an unfaithful husband. I went from one unfaithful relationship to another until in 2010, I came to Christ, and I met someone who led me away from the Catholic Church, which is all I knew, and invited me to go to church with her. And she went to Times Square Church. Ironically, this is a woman who had moved here from Egypt. And she took me to Times Square Church. I went there a couple times, and I thought, like, this is a different kind of feel. This isn't about religion anymore, because all I ever knew was religion. I knew the traditions. I knew the rituals. I knew the teachings. As I said earlier, I was a big fan of Jesus Christ. And eventually, during our short relationship, in which time she said to me, hey, I don't think we were meant to be together. I think God sent me to prepare you for your next relationship. And as that was happening, I decided, well, I'm still going to be looking for someone else at this point. I want to go into a relationship. I want to find someone, settle down, get married. But I went one more time with her to Times Square Church, August 29, 2010. And I heard a powerful testimony. And at the end of the testimony, the pastor did an altar call, and I accepted for the first time in my life. I walked down to the front of that church, and I had never experienced anything like this before, other than those 3 times I went to that church. And I just cried out to the Lord and said, hey, I'm inviting you into my heart, Lord. I want to be the man you want to make me out, who I was made to be. And I no longer want to live this life of infidelity. I no longer want to be a guy who's pursuing the next conquest. I want to be a real man who you wanted me to be. And how can I do that? And as I cried out to the Lord that day in the front of that altar, man, I'll tell you, it felt like I had 1,000 pounds on my shoulders and all the weight was lifted off. Wow. And I walked away, tears in my eyes, and people in that church clapping for me and hugging me and giving me high fives. And I walked out of that church and I felt like a new person, because I no longer left Christ at the altar at church. Now I was inviting him with me wherever I go. He was in my heart. And it was at that moment that I tell people I learned what it meant to be a follower of Jesus Christ. See, I had been a fan for my whole life. I knew all about him. I knew all the teachings. I knew everything about Jesus, but I was just a fan. I was out in the periphery. Now I had become a follower of Christ. So as a follower of Christ, I wanted to know more and more and more. And I started to dive into the Bible, and I started to actually read God's word and read the New Testament and read how Jesus lived his life. And that woman was right. We weren't meant to be together, but she was preparing me for the next relationship. And within about 4 or 5 months, that's when I met Remy. So I was early in my stages of being a believer, and she was as well too. So we were both right alongside each other. And ironically, she also had moved here from Egypt. So here, wow. I go, like, how crazy is that, right? So she had moved here from Egypt about 10 years prior to when we met, through a story that's just like miraculous. And we quickly realized that we wanted to get married. Probably within a year, 11 months later, I proposed. 6 months later, we got married. And about a year and a half later, we had twin girls. And the journey has been just progressing and progressing and progressing. And as an early believer, as a young believer, we just got to mature together, walk together. The journey was together. And as a follower of Christ, I was like, there's more that I can do. What more can I do? How can I tell people? And I had joined the Deacons Prison Ministry about a year or so after my daughters were born. And the Deacons are a softball team that goes into prisons and preaches the word to inmates. We play softball, and in between games, we share testimony and preach the gospel. And I tell people that the first time I was able to do that, I realized what it meant to be a disciple. So my journey has been fan, follower, disciple of Christ, and it's been an incredible ride for the past 10 years. This August, I'll celebrate 10 years of coming to Christ, so I'm looking forward to that.
Man, that is quite the testimony. And it's amazing, as I was listening to your story there, just how God sent, and to me, all I could hear is that God sent an angel into your life to help prepare you. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's constant reminder that, hey, he knew that you as you dedicated your life, or I should say rededicated, it more sounds like, your life to him, and said, God, I choose not to be a fan, but I choose to be a follower of Christ. He saw the authenticity in you, and he sends an angel, and look how he's just showing you that he's with you along the way. And just, introduced you to Remy and where you are now. So that is an amazing testimony. And it's also amazing how you, you surrendered it all. You actually left everything at the foot of the cross and said, that's the old me. And now here's the new me. And God's just kind of refining you as you go. So I want to expand about what you said. You're talking about being, a fan versus a follower of Christ. A fan just sits in the bleachers, but a follower gets in the game. And so, you have this, you're a host of 97.5, The Fanatic, and also Faith on the Field on ESPN that you started that with. And I know you got the podcast that goes along with it and everything. So how and when did this journey begin for you in broadcasting?
Rob, so right out of college, 22 years ago, I started out as an intern at WIP in Philadelphia. I later became a producer there, like right out of college. I was an intern, I was a producer, and eventually I went from there, and I decided that the best way for me to transition into a career in sports wasn't through radio, because the jobs are limited. It's a very difficult field, and I became a journalist, and I was absolutely 1,000,000% blessed, because I landed at the Associated Press in the year 2000, first as a news writer, 3 months later as only the fourth sports editor / main writer that the Philadelphia Bureau has had. The first guy lasted like forever, and then there was another one, and then here I was in 2000, very young, and I got that job, and it was just incredible. So I still continued dabbling in radio. First time I hosted was on WIP in 2002. Then I had the Rob Maaddi show, which was on ESPN 920 Sunday mornings in Princeton for about a year. But then for several years, AP wouldn't allow me to do radio. There was a conflict of interest. There were some things involved there. So I had to just step aside from radio and focus really on my journalistic career. Up until I'd say around 2014, 2015, they allowed me to go back and do radio on the side part-time when I had an opportunity to. And I went back, did some shows at WIP, launched my own show on 610. And then 2 years ago, 2018, I went to 97.5 The Fanatic. And I've been there. I do shows on weekends, occasionally fill in when my schedule allows me to. So it's fun. It gives me a nice platform. But in between there, in 2017, I launched the Faith on the Field show on 610 ESPN Philly. And Faith on the Field show is really what I'm so passionate about that, because it's an opportunity to bring Christ into a sports market. And that came about from a conversation I had with Pastor Kyle Horner. And what happened was in 2016, I came back from, I mentioned the Deacon's Prison Ministry, right? So we would go on a crusade every summer. We go on a crusade, which is like a 5-day trip out of the state. We're all based in New Jersey. So normally we play in New Jersey, PA, Delaware prisons. But once a year, we'll go somewhere. We've gone to West Virginia, Virginia. We've gone to Ohio. That particular year, I think it was Kentucky. I think that year was Ohio. And we spend like 5 days on the road. We'll hit about 20 prisons, play about 40 games. And I came home on fire, man, for Christ. I probably spoke in several of those prisons. And I was like, this is all I want to do. Like, I came home so passionate about that I told my wife, you know, I want to go into full-time ministry. And we had 2-year-old girls, a brand new house. And I didn't know what to do, how I can go into full-time ministry, transition from a career that I had been blessed with for almost 2 decades as a sports writer, as a guy who does radio, occasional TV, all that stuff. So I reached out to Pastor Kyle, and I said, I had never met him, and I saw him preaching online, and I saw some Eagles players sharing some of his sermons. And I was like, if for some reason God drew me to him. So I reached out, and he said, hey, let's get together. We got together sat down for a cup of coffee, and I told him, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. Like, I don't know, how do I go about transitioning into full-time ministry? And he said, why would you do that? Take Jesus to your marketplace.
There you go.
There. And I had never heard that term, you know, take Jesus to your marketplace. And I thought, wow, this is pretty powerful. He said, God blessed you with a platform in sports. Use the platform that you have. Don't quit your job, go into full-time ministry. Take your ministry into your market. And I thought that was amazing. And from there, a couple months later, the idea for Faith on the Field show was born, and we launched in April 2017. A good friend of mine, Doug Horton, and his pastor, Phil Moser, at Fellowship Bible Church in Sewell, New Jersey. They initially were both part of the show, part of the team. We had been doing some Bible studies together with Pastor Phil, and I mentioned it to Doug, and they started out together, and it was the 3 of us. Doug is now the EVP of business for our show. He runs all the business operations for the show. Pastor Kyle has been on the show now for almost 2 years or so, a little bit longer than that. And my wife, Remy, joined the show about 1.5 years ago. So it's myself, Remy, Pastor Kyle, although he hasn't been on in the last 3.5 months because we were doing everything remotely COVID, and it was just Remy and I, but it's been a great journey. So I'm passionate about that show. I love to have the opportunity when I do at the Fanatic or anywhere to talk about sports, because I feel like it's still a platform. And even though it's not my show, it's not Faith on the Field show, I bring a perspective of, I attack doing sports talk in a different way. I feel like I can be on and be objective without being condescending, without being combative, without arguing and name calling, without just really being that kind of crazy type of sports talk show host who's trying to be controversial. So there's a lot of listeners who appreciate that, who can see Christ's heart in the way I approach. It doesn't mean I'm not opinionated. I certainly have strong opinions on sports, but I like to share them in a way where, like, listen, this is just sports that we're talking about. There's no reason to fight. There's there's far more important things in life that are going on. We don't have to fight each other because we have a different sports opinion. You have yours, I have mine, and we go from there. And I feel like the most rewarding time, unfortunately, was in a very sad moment. I was on the air about 1.5 hours after news broke that Kobe Bryant died. And I spent 4 hours on the air in the city of Philadelphia, talking to fans, grieving with them, mourning with them. And that was an opportunity for me to, like, really, bring my faith through into a broadcast that was very, very much needed. And I can't tell you how many people reached out to me over the course of the next couple of days, because the very next day I flew to Miami for the Super Bowl. So I was just like scrolling through. I had like so many different messages, people appreciating that. And I thought, like, sometimes I question, like, why am I doing this? What am I here for? But when people really appreciate your voice, especially in the midst of tragedy, I was like, God put me here for a reason. So the platform that I have, taking Jesus to my marketplace, is one that I take very seriously. It's become my mission, and I love doing it, and I'm all for it, and I go all out to do it. And you'll have detractors, you'll have trolls, but Jesus told us, hey, if the world hates you, remember they hated me first. So
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And you know that I'm glad that Pastor Kyle told you that, because I think we have this idea that we have to bring people into a church building in order to show them Jesus, but we're called to be sent out. It doesn't say go therefore and bring in disciples. It says go out, go therefore and make disciples, go out.
yes.
So, it just reminded me of a sign at an old church that I used to belong to. It said, as you're exiting the building, leaving the lot, going out on the road, it says you are now entering the mission field. And that's the first thing that came to me as you're sharing your story, is you're allowing yourself to be out into the mission field, and where you can have even greater impact because of the platform you have. And I'm going to say this, I believe God had you on air at that moment, Rob, when Kobe died, to be that voice, to be that, to share that hope. That was an opportunity for you to be there for people and share the hope that you have, so they could have that hope too, and with the questions. So that's pretty amazing, brother.
Yeah, man, let me tell you, I didn't want to do the show that day. The next day I'm flying to Super Bowl, and my girls are singing. It's just so ironic, because I'm packing for the trip to Miami, and my daughters out of the blue start singing, "Don't go, Daddy, don't go, Daddy." And
Wow.
it's only a week, but I love my kids, like, incredible love for these two, that I never want to leave them at all. I don't want to leave my wife. And then as they're singing to me, news breaks and Kobe and his daughter, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to fly. I don't want to leave. And then I end up on the station, and I was like, no, I needed to be here. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, man. So, well, thank you for, again, using what you have, that platform, to get the word out when you can. So, hey, I want to talk a little bit about one thing here before we dive into the Birds of Prey book. I want to know, like, what individual, it sounds like Pastor Kyle's been a big influence to you, but has there been anyone else that has been most impactful on you and how you've come across in your journey?
Yeah, well, obviously, the woman I mentioned earlier, who led me to Times Square Church, and as you described, as an angel God had sent to really lead me away from being a fan of Christ to a follower, to understand what it meant to be in relationship with the Lord. But there's also a friend of mine named Tim DeMoss, he's a radio talk show host on a Christian station in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area now. And I met Timmy nearly 20 years ago. He was also in the Philly media, and he invited me to play on his softball team in a Christian league. And Timmy invested time in me, and I was raw, I was wild. I would go to these games, and we would pray, and they would do Bible study. And at this point, this is when I was still in the Catholic Church, so I didn't really understand what they were doing. Like, it was different for me. It was outside my comfort zone, but he really invested time in me. And I'll never forget a conversation that I had with him. And I was sitting in my car, about to go in to get a tattoo, this one, which is Christ, which is the cross. It's like the representative of the Sacred Heart.
Yep.
And I'm about to go in to get this tattoo. And Timmy gets on, introduces me to Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10, that we are not saved by our works, that we are saved by grace. And I had never, through 12 years of school and all those 30 plus years of going to Catholic school, I had never read Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10. And he had a 45, I was late for the appointment because we were on the phone for 45 minutes. And Timmy's talking to me about like being saved by grace, not by works. And see, I thought that I can earn my way to heaven. I thought that I would eventually die, go to the pearly gates, and God would run down a list. You did this good, you did that bad. Well, your good outweighs your bad. We're going to let you in. And it was the first time that I really understood what it meant to have a relationship opposed to being a religious person. But that was probably that conversation with Timmy was 3 years before I accepted Christ. But he really invested time in me. And what he did was he planted the seeds. So he planted those seeds that manifested a few years later. And to this day, we're still friends. I appear on his show from time to time. And he has a daughter he's got several kids, but his youngest daughter was born with a lot of difficulties, and she has been on my prayer list since the day she was born, and she's a miracle baby. She's now a teenager, and I think he'll tell the story that he knew that I had a heart for Christ because he walked around giving out these gift cards. This is Timmy, like he's giving people gift cards, and he gave people gift cards for Christmas one year. And on the back, he had a website telling people about his daughter who was just born. Well, I actually went to the website, read about her, and messaged him saying, I'm going to be praying for her. And that's how he reached out to me and said, hey, it started the whole relationship. And I'm very appreciative of him investing that time in me. So I would say he's had a tremendous impact on my walk with the Lord. The woman that God sent into my life for just a short period of time. We only knew each other for about 3 or 4 months in 2010, but she led me to the church where I accepted the Lord. And, Pastor Kyle, in that conversation that we had 3-4 years ago that really gave me the motivation to take Jesus to my marketplace, I would say they are the most influential in my journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I hear a couple of things. It sounds like you had a mentor, and then you had that brotherhood, you know what I mean, where that iron sharpens iron. And, and that brotherhood's so huge for men. We need that in our lives. And they kind of really, this is kind of a good intro to kind of get into your book a little bit, Birds of Prey, because here we're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles on their Super Bowl journey. And, I followed it, like I said, I told you earlier, Pastor Ted Winsley and I, know each other, and Ted and I had several talks and conversations about the brotherhood, and he would be, talking to me about Steve Wisniewski and others. And I kind of want to dive into this book. One, what was the driving force behind it to make it? And what made this team extra special for you to write this book based on this faith and brotherhood?
Well, I knew this team was special the season before. In 2016, they were only 7-9 that year, but that was Carson Wentz's rookie year. And that, I believe it was October, and it's detailed in the book, that October of the 2016 season, they had some baptisms in the cold tub at the team's practice facility. So when I saw that and found out that happened, I was like, this team is there's something special about these guys. So I started to follow it a little closer, and rather than have conversations in the locker room about touchdowns and interceptions and breaking down the games, I had time to do that. I did that, but I found myself gravitating to the guys who were part of the baptisms, who were either baptized, or Trey Burton was the one who was in the pool with Pastor Ted baptizing the other 5 players. And I just really got to know them on a different level. So the following year, when I launched Faith on the Field show, which was April 2017, it was before their run to the Super Bowl. So, of course, I'm going to have a lot of players from the Eagles on my show. Now, on Faith on the Field show, I have guys across the country, so it's not just local. But it's easy for me to have guys on locally. That September, 4 days before the Eagles' season opener, Carson Wentz, Trey Burton, and Steph Wisniewski came out to an event, a Faith on the Field event that we did live at Eastern University, who was the first sponsor for Faith on the Field show. And it was a Wednesday night, 4 days before the season opener. They came out, devoted 5 hours between leaving practice, coming out there, sitting at the event, going home, completely unpaid. This was them coming out because they wanted to share Christ to this audience. It was a rainy day. We had expected thousands and thousands of people. They had to go and build tents and do all of this stuff because of the rain. We still had about 2,000 or 3,000 people who sat in the rain for 2 hours just to listen to Carson, Trey, and Steph share about their faith. So that was a magical moment. That was a magical night. And then the Eagles go out 4 days later, and I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm like, man, I hope Carson don't throw an interception, because people are going to blame me for having him out 4 days before instead of being in the playbook or whatever it was. But as it turns out, they had a great game. They went off on an incredible run. They go on to win the Super Bowl. Carson gets hurt. Nick Foles jumps in. I knew Nick was a strong man of faith from his first time in Philadelphia, one of the most genuine, authentic believers I've ever met. And once they win the Super Bowl, it was like that night I'm at the game, I'm covering the game. So I'm thinking about, I'm writing stories, I'm doing a podcast for AP, and I'm doing all this stuff. But somebody said to me, like, you have to write, you should write a book on this team. I'd written a book. They're like, you got to write a book about this season. And I knew that, I want to write a book about this season, but there's no way I wanted to be from a football perspective. I wanted it to be about the faith of this team, because that brotherhood, Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, Trey Burton, Steph Wisniewski, Chris Maragos, Jordan Hicks, all of those players, Zach Ertz, such strong believers, strong brothers in Christ. And they'll tell you that if it weren't for their faith, they would not have won that Super Bowl. They lose Carson. They lose Jordan Hicks, who's the captain on the defense, Chris Maragos, who's the captain on special teams, yet they're able to overcome. And God elevates a guy like Nick Foles into that spotlight. And I remember that 5-6 years ago, and I wrote a book called Football Faith. It was about different players sharing their favorite Bible verse. Well, Nick Foles' favorite Bible verse was, humble yourself under the mighty hand of the Lord, so he may lift you up in due time. 1 Peter. And that was his moment. God lifted, he was humbled. He was almost retired. He was almost out of the league. He had crashed as a starter in St. Louis, went to Kansas City as a backup, got another chance in Philly, and sat the bench and waited for an opportunity. And now he's the Super Bowl MVP, and here he is on that stage glorifying the Lord. It was such an incredible story. And I knew that I had other people are going to write about them from the football perspective, and there's been other books written about them from the football perspective of the Super Bowl champions. But I wanted to really capture what made this team champions, and I firmly believe, and they'll tell you, it was their faith.
Hey, like I said, that's amazing. What you shared, because it was funny. My next question was going to have you expand about Trey Burton and the cold tub, and you did that on point. And just that was the moment. That's kind of like where I'm at. I'm just starting to read the book and just reading about that. And man, that just hit me. It just showed me, that these guys were really authentic about their acceptance of Christ. And then it just kind of how it just grew. And I appreciate you going into the locker room and saying, you know what, we could talk about the touchdowns and the wins and all that, and we'll cover that. But let's really talk about the essence of what these guys stand for. And, and a lot of people can say, oh, are you trying to say God won the Super Bowl for them and all that stuff? It's their faith that despite the adversity that they faced, that they kept pushing through. And I think that's where a lot of us men get tripped up. As soon as we hit some adversity, a lot of guys kind of sit back and quit, but these guys didn't. It's because of their foundation they had in place was solid. Would you agree?
Oh, no doubt. And adversity can make or break you, right? But if your foundation is in Christ and your identity isn't tied to your accomplishments, you will understand that God never promised a life free of storm, but he's always there with us to guide us through each and every storm. So they were able to attack each adversity and understand that, hey, He's going to lift us up. He's got our back. We have this. And like you said earlier, God's not playing favorites. There's Christian believers on all teams. There's men of faith on all teams, but it is their faith that was the driving force that allowed them to come together in the face of incredible adversity and really bond. And I don't know that I'll ever see a team that has that kind of brotherhood, because the locker room's broken up the following year. Guys are trickling in, new faces are coming in, guys are leaving. And that was a special season. And you can try and recapture that, and you can build a close-knit unit. But for me, that was something that I don't know you can duplicate. And it was just a really incredible run that they put together.
It really was. You know, like I said, my son and I are diehard Eagles fans, so that was a very special moment, man. I ain't gonna lie. You know, we broke down in tears when they won that Super Bowl, and to celebrate it with him through all that adversity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm gonna keep it real with you today. There's a moment I say, here we go again. It's just we're gonna be disappointed in the end. And wow, was I wrong? You know, and just the way they just kind of just pushed through, man. It was amazing. So, hey, I want to dive into about you and your wife a little bit. You know, in the bio, as I was diving in, you know, it just kind of intrigued me. You guys were part of this thing on WeTV called Marriage Boot Camp. Mm-hmm. Could you share that experience, and how did that all come about for you guys?
Man, I could take an hour talking about it, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible for you in the podcast. We had an opportunity to do a show called Bridezillas, and then from there, Marriage Boot Camp, we were the featured couple, and from there had an opportunity to do the Remy and Rob show before we walked away. And first thing I'll tell people is reality TV is not real. There's not a lot of realism in it. It's not scripted, but it's encouraged to have a scene end up a certain way. So none of the issues that we went to Marriage Boot Camp, like, it was a great learning experience, but it wasn't really real. But we had a vision, and our vision, though unconventional, was to use a platform that we were now being given on this reality TV exposure to take Christ into that arena. And unfortunately, we weren't able to talk about Christ openly on episodes that aired. You know, we would talk, but we had no control over what aired. So, yet I won't say that I regret it, because it gave us an opportunity and a platform to where we grew our social media presence. So even though people didn't get to see it on TV, they started to follow us on, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. And there, we're real. We're not playing characters on reality TV. And they got to see who we really are on social media. Otherwise, without the show, they probably wouldn't be following us. So we've been able to connect with so many different people, share our faith that way. And it's incredible how many times people will reach out to us and just say, you know, thank you for sharing a Bible verse or sharing a story or talking about your faith or whatever it is, because I've been having issues here, or I've been having trouble here, or I needed this reminder, I needed this encouragement, I needed this inspiration, I needed this motivation. So we had a vision. God's got a different plan than what we have. You know, I went into it thinking I would love to build a baseball academy in an inner city like Camden or North Philadelphia, and make it free to kids to come in there who don't live in an affluent neighborhood and can't afford to get training, because I'm just so passionate about baseball. And that was part of my idea for doing the show and trying to build a presence and get funding and all that stuff. Didn't pan out that way, but the exposure and the ability to connect with people and show them who the real Remy and Rob are on social media and bring them to a closer relationship to Christ has been incredibly rewarding, and I'll never regret that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, yeah, you know, what I see again is a platform was created for you guys to have positive influence and share the love of Christ to others through the social media accounts that you guys are connected with. And hey, I want to dive in a little bit about, you talked about earlier, you have two young daughters, two beautiful girls, twins. So, and it seems like to me, as it should be, family is very important to you. So what's it like, first of all, to be a dad of two young daughters?
I love it. It's awesome. And, it's funny. We had a gender reveal party on TV and I had to act like I wasn't all that enthused about having daughters. I wanted boys, but that was acting. But, and I'm sure they know, to have two girls, man, there's nothing greater than hearing "I love you, Daddy," and I hear it all day long, every day, and I say it to them every day. But I think there's an incredible responsibility when you have daughters, and that responsibility is to show them what a good, godly man is.
Amen.
Because they will want to grow up and be in a relationship with someone who is similar to their dad. And I tell them all the time, when you are old enough, because I tell, hey, you're not dating nobody anytime soon and all that stuff. But I say, when you're going to get married, I want you to marry someone who loves Christ and then loves you as much as I love your mom. And what I show them consistently is love and affection. And we get to just read the Bible together. They walk around the house singing worship songs. But I think there's such a huge responsibility in letting them know that God's got to be at the center of everything. Oftentimes, right, we hear God first, family, and then faith, family, football, or faith, family, whatever, faith, family, this. No, it's not faith, family. It's not a priority. It's putting Christ in the middle of everything. So if Christ is in the middle, you don't have to go. If something is first, second, third, well, sometimes your focus is on number 2, not 1. Sometimes you focus on number 3, not 2. So if you take Christ out of a priority, 1, 2, 3, and put him in everything you do, now you approach fatherhood with Christ's heart. You approach being a husband with Christ's heart. You approach working, people in the community, being on a radio show, talking to sports fans with Christ's heart. So I always emphasize having Christ's heart in everything you do. And I try and show them that as best as I can. But listen, hey, we all fail, right? We all fail. Sometimes they're going to annoy me. They're going to get on my nerves, and I'm going to say something that I wish I didn't say. And sometimes my wife and I are going to have a disagreement, and we try and limit those. We try and make sure that we are respectful of each other all the time, because I want them to see their dad respectful of women, respectful of their mother, respectful of everyone else. What we watch on television, how I speak to other people, how I speak to other women. And to me, it's an incredible responsibility. And I feel like men need to do a better job. We need to do a better job. We need to do a better job, first and foremost, in our household. We are not stepping up enough in our household. There is too much of our selfish human nature and putting our own desires first ahead of our family. And what I learned from my dad was sacrifice. My dad my mom always sacrificed for me and my brother to this day. And I'm blessed to still have them in my life. Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. And I wish I could sacrifice as much as they did sacrifice for me. My dad never bought himself anything. Never. He never bought a new car. He never, nothing fancy, nothing like at all. It was always about providing for my brother and myself, paying our education. I was fortunate enough to be hired at the AP while I was still living at home, and my dad insisted on paying for my master's degree.
Wow.
So I learned sacrifice from my father and my mother, and I try and sacrifice for my children and show them what it means to put them ahead of myself.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. You kind of covered my next question there. Like, what do you wish someone taught you? But it sounds like your dad taught you that. He taught you the importance of sacrifice, right? And one thing I heard, and I'm sure you're probably doing this with your daughters, Rob, is, we as men, here, my daughter, she's, she's 28 years old. So, and I still date her. You know what I mean? She's married. She has a husband, but we went on dates even when she was a little girl. You know what I mean? So we go out on dates, man. It's so important to do that. And sometimes she'll remind me, hey, Dad, we haven't been on a dinner date in a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, daddy-daughter dates, they love them.
I love them, man. They're like the best. They're like the best. And, so you keep doing that, man. They'll never forget it. I'm evident of that. My daughter still wants to do that. And
that's awesome, man.
So it's important. They need to see that and the sacrifice that you do, because we all do. I made some sacrifices as well, to get my kids where they are today. So why do you think it is for men in this area of sacrifice, why they struggle with this part of it as dads? Being leaders in their homes. What do you think the biggest trip up is for them to be that ultimate leader, to be that ultimate male, I should say man, not male, man of God who sacrifices for his family?
Selfishness. I think men, all humans, we're inherently selfish. And for that reason, we often put our own self-interest and our own selfish desires above others. And when we do that, we're going to struggle with leadership, whether it's at home, at the workplace, in schools, wherever we are. We're going to struggle with leadership because men sometimes, stereotypically, right? You come home from work, you want to sit on the couch, you want to eat whatever, drink a beer, and watch a ball game. If you're doing that, are you talking to your children, right? Are you investing more time? Like, I'll say this. I make a living in sports as a sports writer and a sports talk show host. We haven't had sports in 4 months, and I've had the best time of my life because I haven't had to spend time at ball games and family. So I hope and I pray that as we come through this COVID-19, we talk about getting back to normal. I did a whole show on this. I did a sermon on this. I don't want to get back to normal. I don't want to get back to normal. I want a better normal. And for me, a better normal is one where we make time, prioritize time with our families above time that we invest in sports.
That's right, man. And it's huge. And it's kind of like, I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we call normal. And I'm with you. I mean, there's so much we can learn from this time and building our relationships that we've kind of let kind of drift, or restore those relationships that need to be fixed. God's, heart cry, I believe, for us is to draw us closer to him, and also to just invest in life. Those things that matter, you going to the ball games, all that stuff, that's part of your career. Yeah, that needs to happen. That's where your provision comes from. But ultimately, the ultimate provision comes from Christ. He is the supplier of our faith. So, of our finances, and also helps us ignite and grow our faith. So shifting gears a little bit, as we're getting ready to wrap up, this podcast is to help men to be encouraged to live their life on purpose for God as they design them to live. And we interview men who have an impact in the Christian arena like yourself. Can you identify that aha moment for you when you said, I'm living in my purpose and what God's designed me to do? You kind of shared on that earlier, but maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
That moment, I think, came for me the first time I shared my testimony in a prison in 2014 when I was, I'll never forget it. It was in West Virginia. It was a rainy day. We were playing against inmates who sometimes you go in there, and some of the prison teams, they have leagues. They're terrific players. They got uniforms. This particular prison, it looked like they just threw a bunch of guys together. Some of them are playing because they don't have cleats. Because it's raining, they took off their sneakers to have better traction. It was a makeshift experience. And we go out to the left field stands, and I was asked for the first time, I was up. I was going to share testimony. So I'd never done it before. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I prayed and I asked the Holy Spirit to just lead me. And the words just came out. My testimony poured out. I shared my heart with those men, and seeing the reaction and the response from those guys that day, July 2014, I knew that my purpose was greater than being a follower. I needed to be a disciple. I needed to be a fisher of men for the kingdom. And it was that, for me, it was that moment that I was really like, wow, this is my purpose. My purpose is to use the mess that I had created and turn it into the message for Christ. And the test that I went through became my testimony. And I really have been on a mission since then to use every platform that I have to share Christ, what he's done in my life, what he's done in my heart, that how he's turned my life around, and just use that to encourage, to inspire people to come to Christ. And then for believers who are already there, man, I love to challenge people. I love to challenge them to dig deeper. Like, I'm really excited about this week's episode on Faith on the Field, because it's been something that's been on my heart. And we're going to talk about putting Christ back in Christianity. Because I'm seeing so many people who are quote unquote believers who are not living with Christ's heart, and politics has become such a big deterrent. And Christians are allowing politics to pollute their heart for Christ. And I can't wait to do that show this week.
Oh man, I'll be definitely listening to that. And you're absolutely right. It's almost like the media has controlled the minds of a lot of people, even those who are Christ followers. And it's time for us to kind of to get back on track, if you will, and to get in line with Christ and his plan and his purpose for us. And that kind of leads me into the next question. We're designed, Rob, to live for something bigger than ourselves, right, man? God's put us on this earth to live for something bigger than we could even put together. I mean, look, he's given you a platform to do that. But there's a lot of guys get tripped up in this area, as soon as a curveball comes their way. I'm just curious, have there been some obstacles, you kind of shared a little bit, that try to derail you from your purpose, and how did you overcome those obstacles?
There's always obstacles, right? There's always going to be. I think the closer we walk with Christ, the harder the enemy is going to work to derail you from your purpose. And sometimes that comes in various ways. I always feel like the week before I'm about to do something major, like whether it's preaching at a church or having an event or whatever, those weeks are always jam-packed with little difficulties at home. Maybe there's an issue with the kids, or maybe my wife and I aren't seeing eye to eye on something. So I feel like the closer you're going to walk, and the more you go out on a limb, the more you are vocal about your faith, the bigger your platform is sometimes, the more the enemy is going to try and derail you from your mission. And sometimes when you work in the public eye like I do, you're going to get haters and trolls on social media. And I feel like those can be challenging sometimes. Those can be challenges, but we're all going to face curveballs in life. Like, they're going to come at us no matter what. Sometimes I feel like if I handle a situation in a way that I shouldn't have handled it in, the enemy will work hard on me, telling me, you're not worthy to stand before this congregation. Look at how you spoke to your kids that day, or look how you reacted to something negative. Look at what you did. He will point that out to me, and I have to fight overtime in my heart to be like, no, we are all going to fail. We are all going to have moments of insecurity. We're going to have moments where we don't live up to the image of Christ, because only he was perfect. So you have to overcome those obstacles. We could face health issues. We could face financial issues. We can face work-related problems. All of these things work together to try to deter you from your mission. But if you fix your eyes on the Lord at all times and come back to that, I am centered in Christ. My identity is in Christ. My foundation is solid because it's on Christ. you will get back on that road. You might take a quick little detour, but that GPS system will get you back on that road. So we have to keep our eyes fixed on Christ at all times and understand and be humble and have the humility to know that I am going to mess up. I'm going to screw up. There's no doubt I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say something stupid. I'm going to react in a difficult way. I'm going to do something, and I cannot allow the enemy to make me feel less than, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not good enough, that I can't stand there and preach the good news of the Lord and shine his light and share his word. And if we keep our eye focused on him at all times, those obstacles, they'll be short and they'll be few, and we'll get back on the road the right way.
You know what? I think it's important for men to hear that, brother, because, you know, we are going to mess up. We are going to fall short. And I think even a seasoned believer can struggle with that, man, where they'll think that, you know what, I can't do this. I can't live out this Christian life. I can't make it happen. I messed up again today, or I messed up a lot this week. You know what? The enemy tries to, he wants to get in our minds, you know, and just disrupt us. If he can get in that mind and kind of get you off track, he's like, I got it, you know, but we have to be reminded, Christ died for our past, present, and future sins, you know, and when he went to that cross, you know, we can't, you know, and if that's a gift from Christ, we can't. Here's what I kind of hear in my spirit is, if we fail and then we're like, well, I can't do it, it's almost like the gift that we received of his grace is almost like we never really received it as a gift. You know, we're leaving him nailed at the cross when we fail, and we're like, I can't do it, Lord. But no, it's a gift. You know, if I give you a gift and then I ask for it back, it's not a gift. Christ gave you a gift. He's not asking anything in return, right?
Through that. Absolutely, 100%.
And I think a lot of guys get tripped up with that. And I don't care if you're a new believer or a seasoned believer, you know, we all kind of get tripped up on that moment. So, hey, as we're getting ready to close, I want to know, you know, I'm sure God's got, a life verse either for you. I know you shared a verse earlier, or what does he have you focused on in this current season in his word?
It's constantly changing, but the one that I've been stuck on for a while now is John 3:30. He must be greater. He must become greater. I must become less. And I find myself every day saying, like, I want to be more like Christ and less like me. More like Christ and less like me. And that doesn't mean that I don't like who I am, but he living a Christ-like life should be the ultimate goal of every believer. Like, I want to be more like Jesus. So I want to love more like him. I want to live more like him. I want to forgive more like him. I want to have the compassion that he had for everybody. I want to love my enemies the way he loved his enemies. I want to be more like him and less like me. So I find myself really praying for that a lot lately. It's probably been a while, and I know, like, I will never, you will never, no man, woman will ever be exactly like Christ, because we are all flawed. But if we can just try to work harder and harder and harder, and that's what I pray, that I could be more like him and leave more of my the negative sides to my personality in the background, and just move closer to being like the Lord.
That's great advice, brother. And God's called us to be selfless. You know what I mean? And basically, what that means is selfless, less of me, more of him. So, what great words to close by. And Rob, I want to give you an opportunity to share about your resources, but I do want to put a plug in for this book, man, because I'm diving in on it. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but as what I'm reading is really good, and I want guys to get this book, Birds of Prey. You're going to learn about the Brotherhood of the Philadelphia Eagles season on their way to the Super Bowl, and the adversities that came along that path, to include Nick Foles coming in for Carson Wentz. And there's so much to share about this faith and this brotherhood that Rob really captures so well. And Rob, with that being said, outside of the Birds of Prey book, well, first of all, where can they get it? And what other resources or ways they can connect and learn more about you?
They could just go to robmaaddi.com. That's my website. And if you go there, you could follow me. You could see all of the ways you can follow me on social media. So just go to robmaaddi, MAADDI.com. I do a lot of speaking engagements. Even though things have been shut down, I've been able to do them virtually. So that's been pretty cool. And I'm more than happy to come out and do conferences, speak at churches, different various events, whether it's a men's breakfast or whatever it may be. You can reach out to me on my website at robmaaddi.com.
Rob, man, brother, I really appreciate you being on today's Resolute Warrior podcast, man. And thank you for being authentic. Thank you for being real, keeping it real today. Thank you for sharing your heart, your testimony, and your faith in Christ, brother. It's been a pleasure.
Like I always say, my story, his glory.
Amen. No better way to end it than there, folks.
Beautiful.
Rob, thanks again, brother. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you.
You can connect with Resolute Men on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Men, stay focused and determined. Fight the good fight. Live for something bigger than yourself. And be a resolute warrior.